public forum. We're expecting Douglas Marshall from Emergency Management Southland. Feel free to come up to the table, please. Welcome.
Douglas has changed.
A presentation from the Regional Defence Civil Defence Group.
Hello, yes, I am Tracy Fraser from Emergency Management Southland. My normal role is team leader, but I am covering the acting manager role until our permanent manager starts next month. So we are here today to discuss our group planning with you as part of a series of workshops between all the councils and our related partner agency committees. I've brought Jim Tetlow with me, who will be putting all of the information collected together to form our group plan for the next 5 years. All right. So I will hand over to Jim now to introduce the plan and get the PowerPoint started.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Kia ora, ko Jim Tetlow takoinga, emergency management consultant, as Tracy said, based up in the far north. I've been working with Emergency Management Southland for a few years now, supporting work there, and currently, as she mentioned, working on this group plan. So hopefully most of you have seen this at some point in your lives as a councillor. This is the strategic document that guides emergency management within the region. And emergency management is really important to understand. Whilst we have a service called Emergency Management Southland that is a sort of a collective, it's a service level agreement across all the councils to provide it as a centralised part. All councils play a part in this civil defence along with our emergency services, our communities, our infrastructure providers. So this document really is the high level strategic document that outlines what are we going to do for the next 5 years. So I'm going to take you through a quick overview and then there'll be some time at the end to get your feedback on sort of what you see go on in your communities as councillors, and feedback into this where you would maybe see some focus being. So this plan, as per legislation on the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act 2002, is due for review every 5 years. Now the current plan ran to 2022, and as part of the legislation it has to be reviewed within 5 years. So we are in the process of doing that. This current plan stays active until the new one is adopted. So all the arrangements required in here regarding, states of emergency and all those things, all completely valid until the new plan is made. Obviously, since 2017, there's been quite a lot of change in New Zealand, particularly in this space. We've had some pretty big events. You've had your own large events with the floods, and on a couple of occasions, you've had droughts, you've had all sorts of different emergencies, but we've also had the ones nationally, particularly last year, with the anniversary floods in Auckland and Cyclone Gabrielle, which is probably one of the costliest events we've had in New Zealand since the Canterbury earthquake sequence. So the idea behind this plan really is it sets that strategic direction for how the emergency management group will work. So how all partners will bring and develop resilience across the region. The hope is that we can have this plan ready to go in the first half of 2025, and that will run through to 2030. So really the presentation today, I'm going to give you a very high level overview of the kind of things we're thinking about within the plan in terms of updating the objectives, etc. And then give you some opportunity to discuss those at the end. In terms of the key changes, well, the big thing is this plan is made up of a series of goals and objectives, and those are reviewed to see whether they're still relevant. Some things will remain the same year on year, and they don't change between the different periods of the plans. Other things are very specific to that time period of that particular plan. So we're going through, we're ensuring that those objectives, they're still relevant, they're achievable, and they actually meet the needs of the Southland community. We're looking at how we include the Māori iwi elements into the plan and ensure that the response arrangements are reflective of those and the partnership that works in that space. Looking at climate change policy and risk assessments that are being conducted across the councils and making sure that we're aligning what we're doing to those findings from those risk assessments. The other area that's quite a big focus is the regional hazard and consequences, and we're using those to ensure that we've got the latest research behind what we're doing. We understand the impacts, we understand the consequences to our communities, and we're planning for those. Finally, we have the thing called the Coordinated Incident Management System in New Zealand, which is a defined structure and system that all emergency services and councils and government departments, etc., operate under. So we have a commonality in the way that we work, and we're making sure that everything is consistent with that. The final part there is a piece of national doctrine called the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, and so that runs from 2019 to 2029, and that really outlines how New Zealand as a country will deal with resilience building across its communities and its regions. Now the NDRS is the latest piece of doctrine. Really it's the one that's been the most recent. The Act was from 2002, and as you may know was going through a process in Parliament, has been pulled back and is being revised, ready to go back I think in the next 12 months hopefully before Parliament. There's another document that goes alongside that called the Guide to the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, and that outlines and defines all the responsibilities of different organisations and how we actually respond and recover to events in New Zealand. The National Disaster Resilience is the most recent document, and that sets out a series of national goals, national objectives that we're trying to align the plan to. In terms of the process, it starts really with a review by the group office staff. So Tracy and the team at EMS, who are based down at Environment Southland, in their Group Emergency Coordination Centre on that site there, sitting down, looking through current work programmes, looking through the activities of the past 5-6 years, and seeing what's outstanding, what's been achieved, what new things have cropped up over the time, and what are the new areas of concern that are coming out from the community and the members that they're working with. The next stage, which is the phase we're in at the moment, is the consultation with all of our emergency management group members, and that includes the councils, really to determine what the needs of the new plan are. So each council has a role to play in the delivery of emergency management as lifeline service providers, and so lifeline services being water, roading, key infrastructure. Those things are critical to how we perform emergency management. We can't actually do a lot unless we've got those services as well. So it really coming out here to find out what we can do to improve that. Once we've got that all dealt with, we will go and create a draft plan structure, goals and objectives, and identify what activities we can use to achieve those objectives. We'll then take that out to consultation. It will come back out to our councils, the members, and the National Emergency Management Agency, and it will finally go to what we call the Joint Committee, which is the heads of each of the councils, the mayors, and that will then be approved to go out for public consultation. So much like any other council document we produce, it has to go out for hearings and submissions. It has 30 days, working days for those submissions, and then if people would like to be heard on their submission, we actually hold a special hearings panel for that. Once we've chosen to accept or modify the plan according to those submissions, we then have to have that approved by the coordinating executive group and the joint committee, and then that's sent to the minister, and it says here Minister of Civil Defence, but it's actually Emergency Management and Recovery now. They provide feedback on the plan, areas they think, and then we can incorporate that, and then it's adopted, and so hopefully by, as I say, 2025 we should have a plan in place. So within emergency management, we work across these 4 R's: reduction, readiness, response and recovery, and the plan is outlined in this structure. We actually look at what we're going to do in each of these spaces. So reduction really is about looking at our risks, looking at how we can mitigate, reduce, remove, or if practical, get people aware of them and understanding how they can conduct that. Readiness is what we do to prepare. So that's our training, our planning, our facilities, our staff, all those things that we can do to get ready to actually get out. And then the next one is what we're doing in readiness and preparing for, which is response. And that's all the actions we take immediately during and after to ensure that our communities can recover effectively from an emergency. And the last one really is quite a key one for councils, and that's recovery. So emergencies are dealt with by Emergency Management Southland as this collective service level agreement, and they organise and manage that coordinated effort to respond. When we come to recovery, whilst this is something that is supported in readiness and obviously planned for in response, this is something that moves back to the councils and becomes part of the council process again. And it is probably the most costly and time-concerning part for councils. And you've only got to look at recent events to how much recovery takes over what councils' workloads look like. So that's probably quite an important one for you as councillors to consider. So the current goals of the group plan, well, the existing group plan was aligned to these 4 Rs, and the National Disaster Resilience Strategy has a vision and a goal for New Zealand. And then it has essentially 3 goals. The first one, managing our risks. The second one, having an effective response to and recovery from emergencies. And the third one, enabling, empowering and supporting our community's resilience. So we are looking to align this plan more closely to those 3 goals. It doesn't mean we remove the 4 Rs because they're generally encompassed in those 3, but we're looking to ensure that we are consistent with the goals and objectives within that National Disaster Resilience Strategy. Our risks and hazards are a significant piece of the puzzle. We need to understand what the consequences of our hazards are across the 4 environments, so that being the social, the built, the economic and the natural environment. And so as a group, we undertake workshops to determine those risk assessments with key partners from all the agencies, looking at different aspects, using a scenario to understand that. We conducted a workshop in mid-2022 to look at 3 of the big ones, tsunami and earthquake from Poisega Trench, and you've got a little asterisk against there, and that's just to note that obviously there's been quite a lot of recent research and things in the press around this, and we utilised a maximum credible event scenario for that, so we were utilising the upper limits of what maybe could potentially be created offshore from here to ensure that we capture all of those consequences. However, we are going to go back and just double check that that scenario still aligns to the latest research that's being issued out. Region-wide flooding being another one that we looked at in detail, purely and simply because it is the #1 risk really for this region, and it is the one that causes the most impacts to many of the activities within the region. And finally, animal disease being a large agricultural region, cases of animal disease, and as we can see with things like bird flu and mpox around the world, and certainly back to past animal disease outbreaks, can have significant impacts on the economy and therefore onto the social environment as well. We're looking to hold some more workshops in the new year just to make sure we've got the majority of the hazards done to a fairly high level. However, we acknowledge we won't be able to do all 24 hazards before the plan's done, so we've utilised a risk survey to give us an initial understanding of those risks and what those consequences might look like. And we use those results to inform the activities across the group plan. So what we're looking for is the things that come out at a high level across all hazards, rather than focusing on one particular thing. If we can find out that they're, say, for example, all hazards have a very high impact on people's economic well-being, then we can start to put some focus in that space and ensure that we're better prepared to meet those needs in a response. So these are things that are happening at the moment alongside this whole process. As mentioned, we work across the 4 Rs. So the first one is this reduction space, and this really is about getting out to the communities, it's about getting out to our organisations and that understanding of the risk, how it affects us and what we can do to mitigate it. And so some of the areas for consideration in this round of the group plan. We're looking to support, engage and continue our hazard research projects, but really with a focus on how it increases our community resilience and preparedness. So also looking at that climate change piece, ensuring that people are able to understand, but we've got the latest research available to us to make sure that we are addressing those issues where we can. We're looking at ensuring that preparedness across all the group members is done through business continuity planning. So all of our members have got plans for how they will maintain services in a crisis. And it is a requirement of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act for councils to provide services to the communities, even if at a reduced level. And so that's done through good business continuity planning and understanding of those demands that may come in that time of crisis and being prepared for those. We're looking at how we develop and share hazard and response information better with communities and with our organisations to inform that decision making at all levels, so that the latest information is available and people can make informed decisions through utilisation of that information and decide about decisions they make themselves, but also for organisations in terms of resilience building of infrastructure. We're looking at working with communities to identify localised risk and the consequences from those major hazards. So where we have big things, and you'll obviously have probably heard a lot about the Alpine Fault, but looking at how does that actually impact individual communities? How can we work with those to increase their resilience and make sure that they get through from those kind of hazards? Certainly looking to provide more engagement with local authority planning to ensure that they've got the most up-to-date emergency management advice, and that's not just from Emergency Management Southland staff, but from our partners in police, fire, St John Ambulance, health, to ensure that they've got those inputs into major projects and have a good understanding of the implications potentially of locations of things or the needs for emergency management. And then finally, the last area in the reduction space was understanding the economic impacts of major events in this region. There are some very big employers in this region, and some of these events could significantly impact them. Loss of the economic, the economy, local economy, will have knock-on impacts to social, which then has all sorts of other knock-on impacts and means recovery takes quite a lot longer. So working with those to understand, if we have a major event, what would this actually mean for some of our really big employers? What would this mean for our city centres? What would this mean for our commercial providers? In the readiness space, really this is where Tracy and the team spend an awful lot of their time. And it's really about getting everybody prepared to be able to respond, having everything in place to make sure we've got the most effective response we can. So some of the areas we are up for consideration here are working with the isolated communities to develop and enhance their community-led response arrangements. So places like Fiordland, but that's just an example. There are many little communities around the region where they are easily isolated in major events. They're cut off, and it's about working with them to understand how they can support themselves for those time periods. A lot of this has been led by what's happened in previous events, and if we look to Hawke's Bay, you'll see that there are some communities there that are more remote, were not actually connected to normal services for up to 4 weeks. And we're starting to tell people the 3 days probably isn't enough. People need to be prepared to look after themselves for 7 to 10 days, because we're not always going to be able to get there. We're looking at developing those existing and also identifying new emergency networks and partnerships to support response structures. So this is looking beyond the existing things, the traditional networks we've utilised. What can we utilise that's up and coming? And there's all sorts of things coming with technology we might be able to build upon. How can we utilise those better for emergencies? Certainly a focus on continuing the multi-agency planning for catastrophic events. So the AF8 and flooding being two really big ones that as a region we need to have really good cohesive planning in place for. Communications networks is a one thing that we've noticed from recent events. We have a very strong reliance on in emergencies, and looking at how we can build and increase the resilience of those within the region to ensure that we can get messages out to people, that people can access information, that we can share information, so that we can ensure we've got a very good cohesive response. We need to ensure that we've got the continued development of the response staff, but also of our governance as well. And that's from our senior leadership teams within each of the councils and all the organisations through to yourselves as councillors. You all have an important part to play within response, whether it's as spokesmen, whether it's as information gatherers, whatever it may be. And it's about understanding and ensuring that you've got the support and the training you need in order to be able to do your job as well as and support us in doing ours. We're looking at maintaining and developing our plans and procedures to major events, and that's at all levels, ensuring that we've got good planning. We do have plans in place, but certainly looking at how we increase and ensure that those are appropriate for what we're looking to do. And then working with our lifeline providers to make sure that the resilience of key infrastructure is there. To take away one of our major roads, for example, can take away our key supply routes to our supermarkets. So how do we increase that resilience? How do we identify where those issues are and build upon those and work with those organisations to build that resilience? And the final one there is trying to build some partnerships with some of the major regional businesses and commerce to support our response. And how that will be, whether that's volunteering, whether that's utilisation of assets, but looking at how we can build into that more into our communities as well. Response is really the area where we focus. Sorry.
I think Grant.
Yeah, could I just make a suggestion? Maybe, if you just put the things up and we can read through them and ask questions as opposed to you to go through them, just absolutely. In the interest of time.
Yep, not a problem at all.
Might be a better way to do it.
Cool. So in terms of response, this is our bread and butter. So this is what the emergency management team is there to do, is to prepare and then to lead responses. So as you can see, there's a lot of suggestions around ensuring that we've got that ability, that capability to staff, to manage, to work together, to share our information both amongst our responders and with the public, and that we've got the systems to support us in doing that. And that's some of those areas. So really this area is about how do we get out on the ground and how do we do that.
Yep. So just a question with regard to that. So do you do an assessment of how ready you are in terms of response, and do you gauge that through time in terms of?
Yeah, absolutely. What part of the process of doing this is to look at our existing systems. So we do that in several ways. One is by working with the team itself to find out how prepared they are, hence why there's some things there maybe around the common operating picture, development of tools and systems. The team themselves have identified that. Then there is the sort of more formal post-response recovery and debriefs from those, where we'll get those lessons and identify where we can improve ourselves. And then there's a more formal system that's coming in, hopefully in the next sort of 12 to 24 months, which will be a national-led capability assessment. So they will come down and do more of a, let's have a look at you across the board. Yeah. So the last time that was done was 2015, but they're looking to do that soon across all groups again.
Yeah, that'll be pretty important.
It's a very important part, yeah.
Yeah, no, good,
Thank you.
And then finally, as I mentioned, really recovery is one that for councils is a really big ticket item. So Emergency Management Southland deal with the response and work across the partners and work with you as councils. When it comes to recovery, this gets handed back to the councils to lead. And it becomes something that as councillors, can become quite a large part of your lives. If you speak to your equivalents up in Hawke's Bay, they'll tell you there's a lot of serious conversations going on about at the moment in terms of council policy and procedure. Many of these things are about ensuring we've got the appropriate arrangements, that people understand the roles and responsibilities, and we've got the right people in each of those environments, the social, the built, the economic. So getting the right people from across the community in place to ensure we've got that information coming in that we need. And really a part of that is to really understand that economic part. So you'll probably see there's a bit of a tie between each of these about understanding, preparing, and then the delivery part of it as well. So, yeah.
So
Okay, councillors, Grant, you had another.
just around, so recovery, obviously a key part of that is the capital required. Have they looked at those previous events, probably Christchurch being the most recent, but yet sufficient time from how that was recapitalised, so insurance, local government and central government, and then where does the responsibility sit in terms of who should fund what? I know insurance, we cover a certain portion in terms of our local government, insurance cover for these types of events, but is that sufficient for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
so have they done any
yeah.
reviews of those sort of recent disasters to say, well, look, you're undercovered here, or you should have had more cover here, or central government should have been stepping in sooner? Or
There is. Obviously, they set up the Central North Island Recovery Agency and the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, and that was by direction of all the organisations saying that simply we won't have this. But if you look actually up north at the moment, some of the rate increases for some of those councils in the North Island are in the region of 20-something%.
Yeah.
I think Napier City Council or the regional council maybe is sitting around the 20% rate increases for people.
So through, say, to compare those two, so with the Canterbury Recovery Program and the North Island one, how much capital did central government allocate to those two events? And was that proportional to the actual total capital impact?
I think if I was to tell you that, I can tell you from Auckland because I do have the figure in my head. Auckland was sitting on about $3.5 billion, and that was excluding some of the other insurable costs, which were another $2 billion on top. So Auckland's sitting on an incredible amount of cost. Now, if you look at that across all of the councils, you've probably got similar sort of amounts. Certainly for the North Island, the South Island Canterbury earthquakes, we're talking billions of dollars. We're talking very much, it has to be a government and local response. You won't be able to do it without central government support.
Yeah, I suppose from a local lens, I'm looking at where does our responsibility sit, and then when does government step in?
Yeah, I think that's a national thing that's certainly, following recent events, is something that will be addressed in this new plan. So they increased the provisions for recovery in the existing legislation in 2018 to ensure that the provisions were there for the recovery manager to be able to undertake the work they need to do. I think you will see in this next iteration a much more emphasised focus on recovery. It's probably something that it's fair to say has not been given as much attention as response has over the years, and it's actually the thing that costs the most and takes the longest and probably, you know, has the longest repercussions.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, if you get that right, then obviously it impacts on our ability around insurance, because then the insurance companies insuring us understand where their liability actually sits, doesn't it? When
Yeah.
central government then comes into play.
Absolutely, and I think the other thing that we've got to be aware of as we go through time is that insurers are going to become more nervous
That's right.
about certain risks.
Well, they
and
already are.
probably, and they already are, yeah. So it falls back to that recovery piece of making sure that we're not maybe falling into the same trap again when we're doing it.
Okay, so we can expect a very much beefed up recovery section in the new group plan.
I would suggest so. Yes, yeah. I think it's got to be very clear about how that's going to be funded and where those arrangements sit. And particularly for Southland as a region, we've got this shared service level. Your roads link into each other. Your boundaries are not discernible to people on the ground, and so that what's happening in one council in terms of recovery needs to be kind of similar in the other councils, or it needs to have that joined up working where it goes through. So we'll look to address that in this plan about how that might work.
Okay, that will certainly suit us. Councillors, any other questions, comments? Ria?
Question really, the ministerial review of the VED responses for natural disasters outlined some key areas that needed to be improved on. One of those was who to and who was to call a disaster. I saw in last year's events the Auckland Mayor was a bit slow to come out and declare a disaster, and other mayors have come out quite fast, and there was even one mayor that came out from a weather forecast to do, if you like, a dry run. So do you think that those recommendations that the mayors should be trained and council, do you think that and does that fit within this plan coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. So one part of the plan that's in here is about how declarations are conducted within Southland. Now, each of your mayors is obviously can sign the state of emergency, but it's not just the mayor who can do that. It can be the deputy mayor or another elected official. And in the absence of any of you being available, the Minister of Emergency Management and Recovery can also do it for the region. So there are, provisions. But understanding when a declaration is made, why it's made and how it's made is really important. And so that's something that Tracy is going to be rolling out in the new year, is a suite of training to ensure that you're well aware of what that looks like and what that might involve. But also to understand that when you make a declaration, what you're enabling the controller to do is to utilise very strong powers within the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act and essentially say to you as councillors, I'm doing this. You've given me the power. So you are that's why it's got the checks and balances of the mayor signing it, is because they're basically saying, here you go, you can now decide what we do in this space.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty powerful thing that you're handing over.
Yep.
So certainly that's part of this plan that would really need to be looked at.
Thank you.
Just to quickly touch on the inclusion of Māori iwi within this plan, and looking at Matuaka, Mana Whenua. We are holding a hui in December with representatives from Mana Whenua, from Ngāi Tahu and from Emergency Management Southland, and this really is to discuss how do we increase that working relationship. How do we develop and make sure that we are aligned and that we can utilise the services and the skills that they are able to bring to the table, and that we have an understanding about how that will be supported. So we're working around that, and this will be the first, I think, of a number of hui's before the plan's done. So you can expect to see in this plan a little bit of that woven right the way through all of those R's. And it really will be about how do we support them to build capability, but then how do we support them to deliver that in response as well. Some other considerations really for you are to look at things like the current funding arrangements, the structure, the current staffing levels. Your mayors sit on the joint committee and provide that information through, and you've got the coordinating executive through your chief executives who can feed into this area as well. Currently it's a shared service, so each council is paying into that to provide a service that covers all the councils. So certainly getting to understand that and looking at what the outputs of that are is pretty important. The other thing to consider are, you've got any specific projects or area of works that you think, as a council, this is quite important, this could have quite an impact on emergencies, that maybe we need to consider as part of this new plan. And just any areas of concern in the way that response might have been managed in the past, and what we can do to address that. And that might be from a councillor's point of view in terms of your information you've got to provide to your communities, because you are conduits into them. At the end of the day, they elected you to represent them, so therefore they're going to come to you probably to tell you what they think. So how do you feed into that, and what can we do to improve that maybe? And then finally, really it's about, we've got these two executive or these formal committees. We've got the coordinating executive group that feeds into this joint committee, and your mayor or representative of the council will sit on that joint committee, and that meets 3 times per year. Outside of that, we're looking at how do we improve the way that we report the activities of the group beyond that to you. So rather than just these 3 formal committees per year, you know, is there something like, say, for example, coming to this committee and just giving you an update on what we're doing in this space going forward? How would you like to see that done? So really those are some of the things that we'd like you to think about. In terms of questions, I'm happy to take some feedback now on those things, but we also have the opportunity for you to feedback over the next few months via a link. So what we'll do is, you've got the presentation here, so this link will be available afterwards. There's a form there for you to be able to go through and suggest where you think. And I'd encourage you to, you know, share this amongst other people as well, so that we can get as much as we can before we go to community consultation. So we've looked at this. What we don't want to do is go out to community consultation and find that we've completely missed what the community thinks of things, and that we end up with 1,000 submissions. We'd like to get limited numbers of submissions, because therefore it means hopefully we've hit on the mark. But it's only if we get the right number of people consulting on it. So post this, if you'd like to provide us with feedback, you can go through that form and provide that. Alternatively, we can also get that through email if it's easier as well, through your KEG or through the joint committee too. So really that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take
Thank
questions
you.
or
I've got
comments.
a question from Councillor Boyle, and I'm just going to check the initial consultation feedback, because we're obviously not going to have everything feedback today. Is that the end of January you're talking about?
Yeah, so we will be looking, ultimately, I think we're looking at the moment to go out to that community consultation in March and hopefully have that. So we would like to get sort of our general consultation, which is what we're focusing on at the moment, done before Christmas, so we can then collate that and get that into a draft plan ready for February.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Thank you. Emergency management, would that cover a major accident on the Bluff Highway?
Yeah, if it so an emergency is defined in the Civil Defence Act as several things, and it can include a major lifeline utility outage, for example, a road
Yes.
loss. And we can declare a state of emergency if, for example, the emergency services are overwhelmed or it requires a high level of coordination. So say, for example, it was a train versus coach or something like that. It could easily be something that could step up, or we can support the emergency services to deliver. So, yeah, that would be included.
Because that's a risk really for us.
Yeah.
Okay, councillors, any other questions, feedback? We've got the chance for Tom.
Yeah, it's maybe more of an observation, but I think the one thing that strikes me is how little councillors ourselves actually know much about this. And while the mayor and often the deputy mayor will go to those meetings, other councillors are not involved at all. And there is basically no training provided. Now on the night, where you have a emergency, and assuming say it's dealt with in over a day or two, it would flash past councillors and they would hardly be involved at all, other than maybe, you know, speaking to the community. But the other 3 R's, other than the response, the other 3 R's are things that councillors definitely should be involved in. And I don't think we really are. I mean, obviously the recovery you only get involved when it has occurred. But I don't think we really are. We don't really do much by way of training or anything like that, and I think that's something for us to think about. I mean, I don't know that, you know, the reliance that we place in insurance, for example, there's a lot of assets that are not insured at all.
Yeah.
You know, the lines aren't insured. None of the electricity lines are insured. So I think there is room for council to be more involved, councillors to be more involved in this sort of work. I haven't thought through how that should be done, but we'd have very, very little by the way of training or even thought too much about it.
So as I mentioned, Tracy's in the new year will be coming out with a training package for elected officials to make sure you're aware of all of these things. And as you say, there is a lot of opportunity for councillors to support the work of EMS and help drive home those messages as well about preparedness. So certainly something that I think we can address in the plan in terms of development of that governance level.
Great, thank you for that, Ria.
Just in supplementary to Councillor Campbell's comment, at the start of the training, we were really lucky that we were sent an invitation from Emergency Southland to pop down and have a look at what we needed to learn. We got given lots of information to read. I felt that that was really quite valuable, and in the sense of how we've got to look after our population here. Once we've looked after our family, then we pop down to support you guys, and we even interacted with the radio and the products and the levers that they have to keep our community on board. So I found that the ability for councillors to pop down to those sessions is actually really beneficial. So I just want to say thank you for doing that.
Okay, councillors, if there's no other comments or feedback, thank you Tracy and Jim for coming in and giving us the presentation. We'll obviously be thinking about it. You've got some feedback generally already. We've got some assurance about some beefing up of the recovery section and a few other things, so I'm sure you'll get some more feedback from us to put into that initial
Absolutely, yeah.
draft.
Once we've got it made up into the draft, we'll put it out to all the councillors as well to have a look and review to make sure you're happy with it.
Great.
So that's awesome.
Thank you for coming
Thank
in
you very
today.
much for the opportunity. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we'll move to the confirmation of the minutes of Finance and Policy Committee meeting held on the 17th of September 2004. If I can have someone move those minutes.
Yes.
Barry and Darren. Okay, moved Councillor Stewart, Councillor Ludlow. All those in favour? Aye. No one against or abstaining. Thank you very much. We can now move to number 6. Shami, if you would like to come, if both of you would like to come to the table, that would be great. This is the 2004-2005 Q1 performance, the Great South update. I believe we've given you 15 minutes, Shami. If you take less, then we'll have some more questions probably.
Good afternoon and thank you very much. We are glad to be back again, and I'll take the report as read because there is quite a bit, there's a few KPIs in there, and I understand that the council is aware that there is a discrepancy between what's been published in the LTP and what we're reporting against because of the timing of the draft SOI coming out, which had to be accommodated within your LTP. But, so the KPIs that I'm reporting against are the KPIs that have been published in the SOI. And what I thought was, since it's Q1, just wanted to give a reassurance that we're tracking well against all of the KPIs. This year we've underpinned our business plan with the staff outcomes, so there's it's a real involvement with all of the staff within Great South to feed into this document. It's real time, and we're really happy to see that the progress is that we're progressing well. Just a few key areas. So this year again we're reporting against 4 priority areas: the regional development leadership, regional promotions, business support and diversification, and net zero. And I'd like to highlight just a few areas that we have had some good success with. So first one was very proud to have launched DISH, Data Insights Southland Hub, on the 12th of November, last Tuesday, and thank you for those that came through. It was a real testament to, we had about 50 attendees there. The media coverage has been really good, thank God. And we also had, since then, quite a good number of visits to southlanddata.nz. The reports, one of the KPIs within that area is to have regular reports, and the reports are being determined at this point in time So the frequency of the reports may differ. So for example, for housing, what's needed, and for environmental management, what's needed may differ. And so the regularity of those reports will be determined once the framework has been established. The work that we're doing is with the councils and our shareholders and wider stakeholder group to establish what those reports will be. The second thing I'd like to highlight is the housing work that we've done. So we've had 4 projects out of that area that we were meant to complete this year. Out of that, we had the Regional Housing Framework discussion paper that was delivered to the joint shareholders, and when we were here last time, which seems it wasn't too long ago, I think it wasn't too long ago, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we touched on some of the, on the Regional Housing Framework. We have the housing dashboard through Dish, and of course that's been launched. And if anybody's had been on it and had a play, you could see that you could find data specific to Invercargill City Council area, so that you have, you know, specific to you and as a region as a whole as well. We've mobilized the development-ready customer journey mapping that we had undertaken with a consultant. So the groundwork has all been completed. I think last week there was the last round of presentations to the councils on their findings, and now the report is being compiled. So that work's well on its way. Really, really proud. Last week was a good week for Southland. We had Minister Jones here announcing that there was a $2.2 million loan to Ocean Beach through the Regional Infrastructure Fund. That followed the announcement of 3 major aquaculture projects that are being considered through the fast track process. And the regional summit touched on aquaculture and energy requirements as well. And so it was a really good indication of how quickly things have changed from last year. Maybe aquaculture was or was not on the cards, to now aquaculture definitely is, and there's a lot that's going on. We've consulted and are developing the scope of the strategy that we're developing. So our focus really in the economic development area will be to complete the aquaculture strategy before the end of this financial year. In addition to that, I think, you know, there's a lot of KPIs and there's a lot that's been there. It is quarter 1, so there is still quite a bit of work to do. I believe that the councillors would have seen that there's quite a bit of work that has already been undertaken. Conscious that I think those are the main points that I really wanted to touch on. So media, business events, communications, all of that's going well. And at the last presentation we made, we also spoke about Tech NZ, and when we had a business event and showed the value of a business event to a region like ours. So I'm happy to take any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Charmy. Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions, Councillor Arnold?
I'm just wondering, Charmy, when we look at all these things, there's so many things happening. I'm just wondering if it would be quite good in the reports to get input as into how you guys have been involved in the things that are happening, because it doesn't actually sort of say that in a lot of occasions, a lot of the things that are happening. You know, like how were you directly involved in, just let's just say, you know, the white paint industry thing down at, you know, at Bluff. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to an overall, because a lot of this is just an overall thing of things that are happening that we all kind of know about.
Yeah.
But just how your actual involvement, Great South's involvement was in enabling it or assisting the enablement of it, you know, that sort of thing, just so we can see what you directly do.
Yes, certainly. No, I can. Would you like, so for the next report?
Just on the reports would be, and our contribution was that we did this, we, you know, directly, you know, just what you actually did.
Correct. Okay. Yeah.
With relation to that.
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grant?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Charmy, for coming along. Just with respect to page 93 of Board Books, I'm not sure what page it is on your report with regard to the social media campaign, I would say. So, noting the NZE Always On campaign, impressions 805,000, but a few more than that, but not. But then only clicks the site 1,300, so it seems like a massive drop-off. Is that normal? Like, is that the normal between impressions versus click-throughs?
Yes, generally it is. When we look at measurements for social media marketing, you're really looking at the clicks to the site.
Yes.
So impressions really are how many times it appeared in front of somebody's feed.
Yeah.
And what we really need to monitor is how many impressions so how many came through to our site, because it's at the site that you get the information that you need, and then that progresses on to an activation or an action from the viewer. It really depends, Grant. The different campaigns, national campaigns, will probably have greater impressions because the audience is much wider. Whereas if you do the comparison of the impressions to the click-throughs, that's where you really see what the value is. So this is, it's still relatively, it's running, I think, at the moment. So by the end of the campaign, it might reach a, greater number.
Okay, and then so second question, just in terms of the 92 ball books, the Australian campaign, so 83,000 unique people.
Correct.
What?
Sorry, Australia. Sorry,
So I suppose my question is, so what? So how many of those unique people actually ended up travelling? Do we have that data? How many of them came to South, and what's our sort of response rate to sort of?
So from the actions from the clicks to the site, is that what we?
Yeah. So 83,000. I suspect a unique person is actually a real person. It's not a machine that's sort of clicked on it or whatever.
No.
So, of those 83,000 people, do we track how many actually end up coming to Southland? In terms of the effectiveness of those campaigns?
No, I don't think we have nailed that down right now. How we're reporting right now, this is just based on the click-throughs. Then we have to cross-populate that with like the bed nights, or review sort of the accommodation stats or any of the tourism data that we might get through Dish. Now we've got that tool to overlay this information with that information to get a better, more comprehensive picture.
So we wouldn't survey them, for example, if they stayed at the Langlands or they visited the museum to say, where did you hear about Southland?
Not always, no.
Do we do any of that?
Sometimes, in some places, we really need to have a mechanism on how we could enable the business to do it more easily, because right now the onus is on them, and it's data that's probably not relevant to them. But it is something that we are looking at getting better data from now that we've got Dish as well. So yes, it is something that we can look into. But it's not available now, sorry, Grant.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay. In that case, we have some recommendations on page 75 of board books. If someone feels that they can move either singly or as a group.
Move as a group.
Move as a group, 1, 2 and 3, receiving the report, noting the updates, receiving the report on the Quarter 1 performance. Grant.
I can second it.
Seconded. Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. No one against, no one abstaining. Thank you very much. Thank you both for being here, and thank you for being willing to answer the questions and keeping within the time frame.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we are now on tab 5, councillors, which is the 2024-25 Quarter 1 performance, and Patricia is moving down the table. So Patricia, as Group Manager, you're going to... and Rhiannon, thank you.
And Jamie may well answer any of the finance questions.
Jamie, move to the table if you wish.
Or he's going to wait until I... Okay, so where I really want to start with this one was directing councillors to some additions. You will notice that this is a new format for the quarterly performance report, as this is the first one of the new LTP. So we do have a number of new KPIs that is within that we are measuring for the first time, as well as a number of existing ones and a number which are given to us by the government. What we've also looked at is both the non-financial and the financial performance measures against the overall organisational targets. So we do have an annual target of achieving 80% or more of our non-DIA KPIs. We are currently sitting at 93% of those. Within our capital program, we're sitting at 47% of our budgeted capital spend for quarter one. Traditionally, quarter one is lower than the other quarters, and this will come through in the financials as well. First quarter roughly ends up to be about 2 months spend rather than 3, and the fourth quarter ends up being 4, just as we do the accounting cut-offs. And on a financial performance measure at the end of quarter one, and those that have been looked at the report will realise there's a small error in it, but when we look overall, we're currently sitting 8.7% better than long-term plan when we exclude depreciation. And we have a target of getting within plus or minus 5% of our budget that was set in the LTP. In relation to financial performance, excluding depreciation, we're actually 400,000 better off than planned, so our surplus is higher. Apologies, the report says it's lower. We've got our positives and negatives around the wrong way. After we take into account depreciation, we are the deficit was 200,000 lower than what we had budgeted. So it's roughly where we would want to be, but it's not saying that it is easy. We're still constantly managing the financials across the organisation. There is, when we look at each of the individual activities, we've got 8 of 17 that are lower than budget, so they've spent more, or their expenditure has been higher than what was budgeted. So that becomes a constant review as we look through this, and for teams to looking at what they're spending. Is there anything, Rhiannon, you wanted to add in relation to the performance measures?
I think it's just worth noting, as the report does, just some changes in satisfaction through the residents survey. That survey's been expanded, so there are some new areas that are included. There are some good news stories in there as well, but also some things to be watching over the year.
Okay, just as a comment from the chair, I do like the reporting of adjusted plan figures rather than forecasts. I think that does give quite a bit more transparency and clarity, so yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Trish, you had a question, comment?
I'm just going to talk about satisfaction. It's very hard to get it. You've got measures that you want to meet, and that it's always possibly going to be below that. Have you thought about any other way you can get people's perception of things? Because I think it is perception. I think there are many things that are working really well, but we seem to get the naysayers.
I think, yeah, that's really good reflection. Satisfaction is inherently people's perception, and so the report speaks to that in terms of whether we're seeing like some differences in what people's sense of what they think things should be. That's why those can only ever be considered as part of a larger picture. So, for example, if you're going to look at the passenger transport activity, you wouldn't want to just be looking at satisfaction, you'd also be wanting to look at the numbers of people on the buses. So that's just one example, and that's where we've got a really good news story in terms of increased numbers of people using the buses. But and that's why in that analysis I've tried to draw that out and give those more contextualised pictures. Yeah. But I think I would just comment that the qualitative information that's coming through the surveys is giving some useful indicators as to some of the things that are driving satisfaction.
Thanks for that response. Grant?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just we've had a few unbudgeted sort of costs come through various committees. Are they included in the revised forecast?
So, through you, Chair, they have been put into the
Adjusted.
they haven't been put into this one yet, because I think the first one that came through was we were allowed to spend the money. We had to fund it from within the existing budget, so that doesn't necessarily make a change.
Yeah.
And then there is a list of budget changes that are included in the pack, and I'm just going to have to go towards the end of the quarter one performance report.
But I suppose we're capturing those as we approve those. They'll be
Yes,
captured
we
and
are
reflected in the plan. Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there have been a couple that have come through, but they've come through October, because this is up to September.
Yes, I
so
understand
they'll
that.
be in
I'm
the
just,
next one.
yeah, so we are capturing those. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, councillors, comments? No. Okay, we have some recommendations, 1 to 4, and then some further recommendations to council. If someone would like to consider moving that the Finance and Policy Committee receive the report, notes the performance in 81 of 113 of the performance measures are either met or on track, 21 being monitored, 3 will not be able to be met in 2024-25, compares to 74 in Q1 of the previous financial year. Recommendation 3 notes 8 of the 17 activities net operating financial performances were lower than budget at the end of September 24, and recommendation 4, the performance report contains provisional results. These may change as more data is accumulated throughout the year, which you would expect since this is the Q1 report. Councillor Ludlow, you're happy to move all 4 of those?
Including the recommendation to council, if you like.
And the recommendation to council. Okay, if I can have a seconder. Councillor Arnold, thank you. All those in favour of those 5 recommendations?
Aye.
Aye. No one against, no one abstaining. Thank you. Thank you very much, all 3 of you, for being at the table and answering the questions and giving the comments. Right, councillors, we are now at tab 7, the financial update November 2024, and Patricia. No? Jamie?
Jamie's going to do
Got this one?
Jamie, you're going to do this one. Welcome.
Cool. Yeah, we'll take the report as read. Just want to highlight a couple of things. So, net debt is at 90 million. Is at the end of which month are we on? October. There is a page that looks like it's missed out of the report. Normally we would have some graphs showing you the progress, so we'll get that back in for the next report. And the other thing I'd just like to highlight is, so we have had Fitch Rating give us a update on our credit rating, and it has stayed at AA+, with a stable outlook, which is a good result.
I've already said it in a media release, but congratulations in this forum to the entire team. It is very good that we have maintained that rating, and the report is an interesting one to read, so thank you to the whole team for that.
Cool.
Councillors, any comments, questions to Jamie? Grant?
Well, just to comment on, thanks for adding in those comparisons between those various councils. I think that's useful for us to see where we're at and, keep an eye on how we progress. So thank you for that.
Councillor Arnold?
Oh, just talk about those same things, Jamie. Why do you always have a wee spike in our one at the end there at 2033, 34?
Well,
The other ones are all going down there. It's got a
yeah,
wee spike. Yeah.
there's a piece of work, I can't quite recall what it is, at top.
It's what?
There's a capital project through you, Chair. There's a
Yeah.
capital project that kicks in
Oh, right.
Year
in
10.
that last
Just in
year
that.
10. And I'm
Can't recall what it is.
It's a Three Waters one from memory.
Michael, do you want to clarify that?
That's an indication of when the Bluff, not Bluff, the Clifton treatment plant
Wastewater.
kicks in.
All right.
Thank you for that. Okay, no other questions, councillors? We have 4 recommendations in this paper on page 106 of board books. If someone would like, thank you, Councillor Dermody, and seconded by Councillor Ludlow. All those in favour that we receive the report, note the current state of council finances, note the current net debt and treasury position, note that it has reviewed the sensitive expenditure listing provided. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. No one against, abstaining, thank you. Okay, councillors, that ends the public session. Thank you to those who have joined us on live stream. Can I have a mover and seconder that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting? That being the minutes of the public excluded session of Finance and Policy held 17th of September, financial update as at 30th September 24, and the ICHL 2024-25 quarter 1 performance. Councillor Stewart, Councillor Ludlow have moved that we go into committee on that basis. All those in favour? Aye. No one abstaining or against. Thank you. Thank you to those who have joined us on live stream. We will just take a moment to move out of live stream and into the public excluded.